Today at 6, new changes to England's COVID rules to make foreign travel easier. Only those returning from red list countries will need an expensive PCR test or quarantine back in the UK, while the amber list of countries has been scrapped.
So it's really a big change today aimed at making this a lot easier, simpler and much less expensive with a settled system through to the new year at the earliest.
But there are concerns the rule changes could lead to more infections. Also on the programme, Wales tightens COVID rules for people attending mass gatherings like sporting events and nightclubs. The transgender teenager given drugs to pause puberty. Now judges say doctors were right to offer the treatment. And Emma Raducanu talks to the BBC and fields questions from even younger fans.
I just wanted to ask, how did you manage the stress to be the last Brit in the US Open?
I was just having a lot of fun out there, and I think that's what helped.
And coming up on the BBC News channel, England get their World Cup qualifying campaign underway against North Macedonia, but will be without captain Steph Horton for their opener.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. The government has announced major changes to the COVID rules for travellers leaving and entering England. It's scrapping the traffic light system which classified countries as red, amber or green, and instead from next month all countries will be designated either red or open, with people returning from red countries still having to quarantine in designated hotels. The number and type of COVID tests is changing for travellers too from October the 4th. You'll no longer have to take a lateral flow test before setting off and won't need an expensive PCR test on return if fully vaccinated. However, there must be a lateral flow test taken within 2 days of arrival. And people who've been given vaccines approved for use in the UK will now have those inoculations recognised regardless of where in the world they were originally jabbed. The changes only apply to England at the moment. In Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, the devolved administrations are in charge of their own travel rules. Our transport correspondent Caroline Davis has the very latest.
Travel has meant testing. Across the country, centres like these have popped up to swab passengers, but things are about to change. Throughout the summer, the travel industry and the government have disagreed about the use of these PCR tests for all travellers when they arrive in the UK. The government has always argued that this is necessary to be able to identify variants of concern, but the travel industry say it's a barrier and too expensive. Before the end of October, if you're double jabbed, PCR tests are going to be replaced by the cheaper lateral flow tests. If you test positive, you will need to have a PCR test and isolate at home. It's a relief for hotels who've struggled as families have stayed away because of the added cost.
The UK market has dropped between 50 and 70% depending on the travelling month, especially if family is hard hit by the restrictions implemented and the traffic light system, which obviously every 3 weeks is sort of like a surprise what's going to happen. So we definitely believe that this change is going to boost sales massively.
It's not the only change. From the 4th of October, fully vaccinated travellers will also not need to take a pre-departure lateral flow test before they travel. If you're not double jabbed, it's a very different story. You'll need to take a test before you travel and self-isolate at home for 10 days after every international trip, as well as paying for PCR tests. For industry, these changes can't come soon enough.
Very pleased with the announcement. Just what we wanted to hear. I think the government has been listening to the industry. We've been interacting with them for some time. It's a great piece of news for us. It will give our customers the end of summer they deserve, abroad in the sun. So, yes, we welcome the announcement.
But not everyone in the scientific community agrees that PCR tests should be removed.
I would like to see PCR tests remain because they've given us so much information already from the sequencing. So we know when Delta was introduced into the UK, when the Delta variant came in, that this virus was imported over 500 times. And we wouldn't have that information if we weren't doing the screening and the sequencing that's associated with that.
After months of insisting PCR tests were needed, why has the government changed its mind now?
The judgment of the scientists, of the experts, was that it would have been too soon without having the numbers of people vaccinated, not just at home, where, of course, we had this very fast vaccination program, but critically abroad as well, at a level whereby, we can now say with a lot of confidence, not only are 9 out of 10 adults vaccinated here, but abroad also they've caught up with the very high numbers that we saw earlier.
And for those with loved ones in some red list countries, there was good news. Passengers coming back from 8 countries, including Turkey and Pakistan, will no longer have to quarantine in a hotel from next Wednesday.
We are now very relaxed, and we are happy to see our families or our friends or people gonna move around easily.
The summer may be drawing to a close, but today's announcement has given the industry some hope. For now, they're enjoying this moment in the sun.
Caroline, these changes are for England only. What about the rest of the UK?
So far we've heard from Wales that they've said that they will be following the same red list changes. Those same 8 countries will also be moving from the red list next week. But they are considering the other elements that have been announced today. We haven't yet heard from Scotland and Northern Ireland. I have to say that the industry really is relieved by this announcement today, not just because of the changes to testing. There are some new countries that are coming off the red list, like Turkey and Egypt, that are key winter sun destinations, so that also gives them a bit of hope for the next few months. A big element of what they're still looking for is making sure those PCR tests change to lateral flow tests. The government have said that that will happen by the end of October. The industry is very keen that it happens before the half-term holiday to make sure it catches the half-term holiday as well. And so things will be possible to be able to sell for that period. It might be a bit later than the industry had hoped, but in general, this is better late than ever for them.
Sure. OK. Caroline, thank you. Caroline Davies there. And you can get more details on all the new travel changes on our website. That's at bbc.co.uk/news. And the Welsh Government has announced tighter COVID rules for people attending mass events. You'll need proof of vaccinations or a negative COVID test. The new controls come into force next month for venues like clubs and at sporting events. Here's our Wales correspondent, Howell Griffith.
Thou shalt not pass unless you've got one of these. Not the Welsh Government insists a vaccine passport, but proof of either being jabbed or a negative lateral flow test. Mandatory COVID passes haven't been welcomed by the hospitality industry. At this nightclub, they'll say they'll comply if it means avoiding another lockdown.
It's not ideal, but these are not ideal times. People come to the club, we already check their ID, we search everyone. Having them show a COVID pass, it's not a big problem.
So you'll go with it just to stay open?
Yes.
Football and rugby stadiums will check for passes too, but the whole system depends on people taking tests, reporting their own results. The First Minister warns giving fake information could become an offence.
Who on earth would check someone's lateral flow test result?
Well, people do it now. And so it is possible for the system to be properly policed. But that isn't the purpose of the system. The purpose of the system is to help to keep Wales safe and keep Wales open, and the vast majority of people in Wales want to play their part in doing that.
Safeguards like having to wear masks in shops and telling people to work from home were kept in place in Wales over the summer, but they failed to stop the spread of the virus. Now pressure's being felt once again in hospitals.
Emergency wards across Wales say they are already stretched. Some intensive care patients are being moved between hospitals. Here in Cardiff, they say most of their new COVID patients are unvaccinated.
I mean, it makes me angry and it makes me upset. And that is because I'm seeing these people at their worst. And they're often in tears, or the family are in tears, going, I wish I'd done it. Or, is it too late for me now to have it? And unfortunately, by the time you are that sick with COVID, it is too late.
What's the latest from that on the family?
Whether making passes mandatory will prove to be a remedy may take months to discern. The new rules come into force on October the 11th. Howell Griffith, BBC News, Cardiff.
The government's latest coronavirus figures show there were 32,651 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period. That means in the last week there was an average of 29,476 new cases per day. There were 8,068 people in hospital as of yesterday across the UK. 178 deaths were reported in the latest 24-hour period. That's of people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 test, which means the average number of deaths per day in the last week is now 142. 89.3% of people aged 16 and over have had their first jab, and 81.5% are now double jabbed. The new Housing Secretary, Michael Gove, has decided to pause controversial government planning reforms. It's understood he wants talks with Conservative MPs who voiced their concerns about the proposals. Our political correspondent Nick Eardley is at Westminster for us. Nick, these plans are paused apparently, but the government has made that commitment, hasn't it, to mass building of new homes?
Yeah, Clive, Boris Johnson has promised to build 300,000 homes in England every year by 2025, and to do that he was preparing to introduce some pretty radical reforms of planning laws in England. They would have given developers much more freedom to build homes in allocated parts of the country, but they were deeply unpopular with some residents who could have been affected, and with many Tory MPs as well. They were worried that it could undermine local decision making. Perhaps just as significantly for some, they were worried it could undermine their own electoral fortunes. And when the Housing Secretary Robert Jenrick was sacked in the reshuffle on Wednesday, there were questions over whether there would be a rethink of this deeply unpopular policy within the Conservative Party. And it does seem that the new Housing Secretary, Michael Gove, is prepared to listen to the arguments against the government's current plans. He's paused the reforms as they are at the moment. He wants talks with Tory MPs about the way forward and is said to be in listening mode. Now, this doesn't mean that these plans will definitely be ripped up. It may well be that Mr. Gove turns round and decides that he wants to keep them. But those Conservative MPs who are deeply uneasy about the government's plans are happy tonight. They hope that this could lead to a pretty radical rethink. Labour say the plan should be ditched altogether.
OK, Nick, thank you. Nick Eardley there at Westminster. An NHS trust has won its appeal to overturn a landmark ruling on the use of puberty-blocking drugs for children. Last year, the High Court said it was highly unlikely that a child aged 13 or under would be able to consent to hormone-blocking treatment, and it was very doubtful that a child of 14 or 15 would understand the long-term consequences. But now the Court of Appeal has ruled in favour of the Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust, which runs the UK's only gender identity development service for children, with the judges saying it's up to doctors to exercise their judgment on patient consent. Here's Alison Holt.
Kira Bell's experience of how teenage decisions shaped her life led to the original court case. At 16, desperate to transition from female to male, she was prescribed drugs to delay puberty, then male hormones. Now in her 20s, she believes it was a mistake. Last year, she told me she should have been challenged more.
The discussions were very brief and there was no real investigation into why I had gender dysphoric feelings and how I got to that stage. I spoke briefly of depression and anxiety, but again it was kind of assumed by everyone that transitioning would alleviate that.
She was treated here at the Tavistock, the UK's only gender identity clinic for children. Last December, the High Court ruled that someone under 16 could not fully understand the implications of taking puberty blockers, so the NHS stopped prescribing them to younger people. Overturning that, today's Court of Appeal judgment found the High Court was not in a position to give guidance that generalised about the capability of persons of different ages, concluding that it placed patients, parents and clinicians in a difficult position and should not have been given.
We're really pleased about this judgment.
The Tavistock's chief executive says that means they can once again send young people worried about their gender identity for puberty blocker treatment after careful checks and discussion.
At the heart of that is respecting what young people know about their own minds, their own bodies, and I think that's a really important principle. With all the clinical safeguards that you need in cases of this kind, but respecting the autonomy of young people at the same time, working obviously with their parents and families.
Kira Bell's lawyer says they are disappointed by the ruling, but he believes the case has already ensured much more scrutiny of these life-altering decisions.
The case has been hugely significant in terms of medical treatment for children with gender dysphoria, and not only in this country, but around the world. In this country, the NHS has updated its advice on the reversibility of puberty blockers. An extra layer of protection has been put in place for children who are receiving treatment at the Tavistock.
But these arguments are unlikely to be over. Kira and her legal team say they hope to challenge today's ruling in the Supreme Court. Alison Holt, BBC News.
It is exactly 6:15, our top story this evening. It's hoped new changes to England's COVID rules will make foreign travel easier. There'll be fewer tests and the amber list is scrapped. And still to come, the energy-saving household tech that can slash bills and cut your carbon footprint.
Coming up in Sports Day on the BBC News channel, as New Zealand's men's team abandon their tour of Pakistan following a security alert, we will assess what it means for the future of tours there, including the upcoming one for England.
It's just over a month since the Taliban seized control of Afghanistan, and while during this period some British citizens have managed to leave Kabul and reach Qatar, there are still UK citizens and Afghans who worked with British forces who were stuck in Afghanistan. Britain has helped more than 15,000 people leave the country, but our special correspondent Lucy Manning has been speaking to some of those who are still trapped and fearing for their lives under Taliban rule. The BBC has changed some of their names to protect their identities.
I feel betrayed and we feel left behind.
On the run.
Help those people who help you in your operations.
Stranded.
No, I'm really stuck and there's Taliban everywhere. They haven't done anything for me,
In hiding. All feel abandoned by Britain. For Afghans who worked with UK forces, week by week the fear rises. With reports some have been murdered, Ahmad, a former interpreter, is now having to stay apart from his family.
I'm living from place to place.
How difficult is the situation for you at the moment?
It's very, very difficult for me financially and security. From the security perspective, it's both, and also mentally.
Ahmad was told by British officials last month to go to the airport, but the crush was too much when his 2-month-old daughter was with him.
Do you think the government are doing enough to help people like you who haven't been able to get out?
I feel betrayed because we were the people deserving to be relocated. We have helped them, but when they left us behind, we really feel betrayed.
Shot by the Taliban while on patrol with British troops in Helmand, his life once again at risk.
As day and weeks passes by, I'm gonna, I don't know what's gonna be my destiny. I don't know if I can survive.
Former interpreter Mujib might appear to be one of the lucky ones. The UK is encouraging Afghans to get to other countries. He made it to Dubai, but is still stranded.
I saw the news that the British government said that we are happy to evacuate the people from third country. But it seems now that they have no plan for the third countries. I don't know where to go next. I'm just waiting every day. I'm checking my email to have something, some good news from the UK government. But I'm not receiving anything now for weeks. There's no reply, nothing. So I don't know what to do next. And I have no idea where to go.
Ziad came to see his sick mother, and now with his wife and child can't get back to his home and job in Wales. He's far from the only one.
As you can see my other cousin saying over there, I'm going to show you in the camera, he's also a British citizen saying there, he's also waiting for that. There's loads of people who is waiting to just get up from here and take their family with them. My lots of schoolmates are here as well, to be honest. Lots of people are stuck.
Do you feel that you've been left behind?
Of course, because it's not just 1 or 2 or 10 people. So there's more than hundreds, Can't see like British government is taking the action and they are not serious about their citizens. Till now, I didn't receive any help.
13 Britons left Afghanistan on this flight to Qatar last week. The government says it has evacuated 15,000 people and is still committed to helping the rest. But until that happens, hundreds are left fearing the Taliban could get to them first. Lucy Manning, BBC News.
A judge in America has ruled that lawyers for Virginia Giuffre, the woman who's accused Prince Andrew of sexual assault, will be able to serve legal papers on his representative in the US. It follows a dispute over whether the prince had been formally notified of the civil claim against him. The Duke of York has always denied any wrongdoing. Our royal correspondent Johnny Diamond is here. Johnny, so just sum up where we are with the legal process now.
Well, Clive, it's been a week of legal manoeuvring centred around this issue of serving the papers containing the allegations against the prince either into his hands or into the hands of his lawyers. On Monday, the lawyers went head-to-head in New York, arguing over whether those papers had been properly served. On Wednesday, the High Court here said it would assist lawyers for Virginia Giuffre, the woman who made those allegations against the prince, allegations the prince denies. It would assist those lawyers in serving the papers. And now a judge in New York has said, as you say, that the papers can be served on the prince's US lawyer, the man who spoke on Monday. That means this case will almost certainly now go ahead. That lawyer says that a deal struck by Virginia Giuffre in 2009 with Jeffrey Epstein, one-time friend of the prince, convicted paedophile, that deal will make any court case against Prince Andrew null and void. But that deal is secret and sealed, and only when the case proceeds might it be opened.
OK. Johnny, thank you. Johnny Diamond. Now, two men have appeared in court charged with the murder of the journalist Lira McKee in Londonderry. She was shot dead by a gunman from the dissident Republican group, the New IRA, in April 2019. Here's our Ireland correspondent, Emma Vardy.
Lira McKee's death had a huge impact in Northern Ireland. The 29-year-old was an up-and-coming journalist and gay rights activist.
Within the LGBT community, we have a saying that we tell people, we tell them it gets better.
She'd been stood near police in Derry's Craigan estate as rioters threw petrol bombs at officers. A gunman from the dissident group, the New IRA, fired up to 10 times towards police, and Lira McKee was killed. Today, two men from Derry appeared via video link in the city's magistrates' court, charged with murder. The prosecution said 33-year-old Peter Gerard Kavanagh escorted the gunman, and Jordan Devine, who's 21, it's claimed encouraged him, punching the air as the shots were fired. The two men are also charged with possession of a gun and rioting. Both are said to be linked to the dissident group Siru, which is claimed by police to be the political wing of the New IRA. It was described in court by the judge today as having a mindless ideology. The defence said the evidence against the men was weak and they were released on bail. Police believe the dissident group, the New IRA, still pose a threat in Northern Ireland, especially to the communities they live in. The memory of Lira McKee's death continues to evoke strong emotions here. Those in court today accused of her murder have not yet entered a plea and will appear again next month. Emma Vardy, BBC News, Derry.
Let's take a look at some of the day's other top stories now. And the United Nations says failure to cut greenhouse gas emissions is setting the world on a catastrophic path of global warming. A new report by the UN has found that pledges made to curb emissions won't actually meet the ambitions of the Paris Climate Change Agreement, signed in 2015, to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial temperatures. Women's rights campaigners have welcomed a report by the police watchdog which calls for violence against women to be given as much priority as countering terrorism. Police leaders say better investment is needed for this to happen. Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary has found that 3/4 of domestic abuse cases were closed early without the suspect being charged. The leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey, says his party can provide an alternative to the Conservatives for people who feel taken for granted by Boris Johnson's government. He will tell the party conference, which got underway today, that coronavirus laws should be scrapped, and he'll restate the party's opposition to vaccine passports. Now, the government's delayed heat and building strategy, due to be published later this month, will set out proposals on how to improve energy efficiency in our homes. Last year, nearly 21% of the UK's carbon emissions came mainly from domestic heating and cooking with natural gas. Our science correspondent Victoria Gill looks at how you can make your home fit for the future.
Whether it's a flat or a house, and whether we own or rent, our homes and how we heat them emit a significant amount of greenhouse gas. So some are taking the energy efficiency matter into their own hands.
Bills have gone through the floor.
Really?
Absolutely. They've gone right down.
We're going to give you our camera. Can you give us a virtual guided tour of your home, please, Rod?
I'll see what I can find to show you.
Thank you.
So, this is the living room. The window is triple glazed. We'll continue into the kitchen now. It's an electric kitchen. There isn't any gas in the house. We'll carry on along into the bathroom, where I can take a bath using water generated by a heat pump. They're very good for the climate too.
Even with government grants to help us reduce our household emissions, these retrofits can be an investment. From a £20 roll of loft insulation to between £6,000 and £18,000 for a brand new heat pump. So in this empty council house near Harrogate, researchers are putting retrofitted energy-saving measures to the test, comparing how much they cost to how well they work.
Doesn't appear to be any major leakage around the window. I'll check under the sink.
We put in new double glazing and new doors.
Okay.
So we did the experiment before the glazing came in, and we did exactly the same experiment afterwards.
Right, and these are the new windows. What were they replacing?
So these were replacing old double glazing, and they've improved the energy efficiency in this house by about 5%.
Right, it doesn't sound like a lot.
If you only had one day, for example, where you were going to do all of the improvements that you could possibly imagine, I would suggest that you go into your loft and see what insulation you've got installed there. One of the big problems with loft insulation is there's stuff on top of it. Have a spring cleaner.
Oh, the junk will squash and stop the insulation from insulating.
And that's right. Bin bags full of clothes or old toys will sit on top of the insulation and make it less useful for us. The second thing that you can do is go around the room, go around your house and look for different areas where there is leaks going through. So things that we consider drafts. If you can seal up drafts, then you can save energy leaving your home as well.
I've now got a granddaughter, less than a year old, who's going to grow up into this world that we're leaving behind for her.
While some homeowners are on a mission to make a difference, the challenge for the government will be how to decarbonise 28 million very different homes. Victoria Gill, BBC News.
The British teenage tennis star Emma Raducanu has revealed that on her first night back in the UK, she watched a replay of her victory in the US Open final, and she says her success is only gradually sinking in. Natalie Perks has more, and her report contains flashing images.
Since she burst onto our screens at Wimbledon this summer, life has been a whirlwind for Emma Raducanu. But now home, she's done the one thing she'd been desperate to do.
Last night, I actually just rewatched the final and tried to relive a couple of the moments and remember how it felt. So it is sinking in a little bit more.
Back in the arms of Dad Ian, she credited him and Mum Renee as the driving force behind her success.
Probably tough love, and at the time, I'm probably not as grateful as in hindsight. But they just gave me a hug when I came back, really. Nothing crazy, no big celebration. My mum made some really good homemade dumplings, but there was nothing crazy or over the top. Just some reassurance and saying they're proud of me is enough.
Since last Saturday, she's not been out of the headlines, but this morning she faced her toughest questioning yet from young fans.
How did you manage the stress to be the last Brit in the US Open?
Personally, didn't feel any stress. I was just having a lot of fun out there, and I think that's what helped, because I wasn't thinking at all about anything that was out of my control.
I'm just wondering, what will you spend your prize money on?
What will I spend? I would just leave that to my parents and my team, to be honest. I'm just focusing on what I love to do, which is competing.
She hasn't even been shopping yet. Further proof Emma Raducanu isn't your average teenager. Natalie Perks, BBC News.
Now, time for a look at the weather news. Chris Fawkes has the details. Hi there, Chris.
Hi Clive, well, we've had a mixed weather picture today. Temperatures reached about 22 degrees in the best of the sunshine across parts of eastern England, bit of patchy cloud here and there. But it's not been like that everywhere today. Across Northern Ireland and Scotland, we've had a weather front bringing low cloud, bit of mist and fog, some outbreaks of rain as well. And that front has really barely budged through the whole of the day today. These rain-bearing weather fronts you can see on the charts just here, basically going to take the whole of the weekend before they get eastwards across all areas. So really slow-moving fronts. Overnight tonight, they'll be still bringing some fairly hefty rain across eastern Scotland, but the rain will tend to become lighter and drizzly, really, in nature across western parts of England and Wales as well. So some mist and fog patches forming around the coast and hills here. Temperatures overnight, quite mild, 10 to 14 degrees, something like that. And then tomorrow, well, it's not a bad start to the weekend, really. There will be some damp weather along this old front, but otherwise, across eastern Wales, central and eastern England, the weather brightens up with some sunshine. Should be some brighter weather too for parts of western Scotland and Northern Ireland. But along the front, well, later in the day, we'll probably start to see one or two showers breaking out. Some of them could be quite heavy. Temperatures are the highest, again, in the best of the sunshine across central and eastern England, 23 degrees Celsius. That's going to feel warm in that September sun. Then, as we go through Saturday night, we're going to start to see some big storms break out across Wales, Northern England and Scotland. And really, it's through Sunday as these storms slowly push their way eastwards that we could start to see a few impacts, because the storms could be quite slow moving across parts of central and eastern England, potentially bringing some localised surface water flooding, although the amount of rain you get from one storm to the next is going to vary a lot. Western areas tending to brighten up later in the day on Sunday, and our temperatures down a little bit, but still close to average, 17 to 20 degrees Celsius. So it's quite a mixed weather picture this weekend, but for many of us at least there will be some spells of sunshine for a time. That's the latest, Clive.
Chris, thanks for that. And that's it. So goodbye from me. Now on BBC One, let's join our news teams where you are. Have a very good evening.